Hi, it's Jackie Tantillo with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother. I have my cup of tea. I'm in the studio ready to go, and I'm going to call someone I've known for a number of years. His name is Bill Attride, and he's an astrologer. What I love about Bill is that he blends the spiritual and psychological together. It's not, we'll ask him when he picks up. Hopefully he's going to pick up. I'm sure he will. But the difference between like a psychic and an astrologer, and he's absolutely brilliant. He's been doing this for decades. So I'm just going to start putting the old phone number in the telly here and see what he has to say about his mom. I've heard they had an amazing relationship, and I'm really curious.
Hello.
Hey,
Bill.
Bill. Hi, it's Jackie from Should Have Listened to My Mother. How are you?
I am fine. How are you today?
Good. I'm great. And I know you're really, really busy. I know you got a lot of balls up in the air, but I've been waiting to be able to talk to you about your mom for a long time because I heard that you two had a really special relationship. So I know we're both on tight schedules, but we'll try and breathe a little bit because I have a feeling this is going to be a really powerful episode for my podcast.
Okay.
What's your mom's
sure.
name?
Her name was Alice Attride. Her maiden name is Tracy, so it's Alice Tracy Attride. And I could tell you a little bit about her, just her background, and then get into my experience of her, I guess, would be helpful.
That'd be great.
Yeah, she was born in 1913, and she was a twin. And in fact, in that family, her mother's family is famous for twins. Her mother was a twin, and my mom's family, her sisters and brothers, there were 3 sets of twins. In her family, she was a twin. Then another sister had a twin who then died, and then she had a brother, and then she had another set of twins, and one of those died. And then they had another child born, and that one died. And that was what went on back then. So they had 8 children. Only 4 survived.
And where was this?
So,
where was your mom?
She was born in New Rochelle, New York. Her father was Jacques Hubert Tracy, and he was a cotton broker in New York City here. And his family, the Tracy family, goes back many, many generations. We trace it back to Jamestown and then jumping across. But the Tracy book goes back to William the Conqueror. So my mom's side of the family,
wow, that's a first.
Genealogy is ridiculous. And we can trace it one after the other, boom, 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 coming over to William the Conqueror, even before that, and being knights in England, the conquerors, the Normans. And on the roll of Battle Abbey, there's the Tracy crest. And then several generations later, one of the knights, Henry II, he's saying, oh, well, someone with me, this man, Thomas à Becket. And one of the answers, we jumped in the boat, rowed across the channel, went to Canterbury Cathedral, and killed the bishop, the archbishop. And it's on the plaque there saying, William de Tracy struck the fatal blows. So we always joke my mom's family murderers, you know. They're
be careful. Be careful, Bill.
They're carrying out the king's bidding, you know. And then they came to Connecticut and Jamestown in the 1600s. And from that point onwards, we can trace it all the way down. And my great-grandfather, my grandfather's father, he was in the Civil War, got a bullet in his head fighting for the North, and then went to France to study painting, came back, became a painter, went back to France.
He didn't die from the bullet in his head.
No, he did die from that. And married a Frenchwoman, and that's why my grandfather's name is Jacques, because even though he was Jack Martin Tracy, he named his son Jacques Hubert Tracy, because John Martin Tracy married a woman named Guillemont, Melanie Guillemont. And so there's all this foreign French, Norman stuff on that side of my family. And then my dad's family is good old Saxon stock from England, so we'll get to him later. So my mom is born in this family, and she and her twin survive. And she's going to college, but now the Depression comes along, and the family is wiped out. The cotton market went before the stock market, and the family's having to sell off everything, and the whole house is full of all these paintings of my great-grandfather, who was very famous. He was he ran in a circle where he was painting all these outdoor hunting scenes with men and their dogs and things like that, and landscapes, and he's pretty well known. And I've got one of the studies here hanging over my desk here, which is one of the few things that remain. The family sold off all the paintings to survive. And my mom started going to Barnard College, and then her father died right before she was to graduate, or a year or two. And so she went to live with her uncle, Lorison Riggs. And Uncle Lorison was very well-to-do and very, very well-connected. My mom comes there, and they're the poor cousins now, right? She's staying with him, going to Barnard College, using a nickel a day to take the bus or whatever to the school. And he dressed formal every night for dinner. And my mom tells me the story how she had one dress she would wear every night to dinner because
he didn't buy her a dress. He didn't.
No. I mean, they were giving her a home. They're helping her out. But this is she just like these stories she tells about like how you got through those times.
Yeah.
And her dream was like the King Tut thing came, and she said, "I want to be an archaeologist." But she put that dream aside, and she studied science. She was a scientist, and she became a bacteriologist. And so here she is in the 1930s working at Cornell Labs and Cutter Labs, and the miracle of antibiotics comes along, and everybody's dying left and right from all these different things, and all of a sudden people are getting up and walking out of the hospital. She said it was like a miracle, and she was so thrilled to be involved in it.
That's crazy.
She was so thrilled. I mean, obviously, because people did die because we didn't have these medicines, and so, people were being taken out left and right, children as well as adults. And so she said it was like unbelievable. And you can see when she talked about how she lit up. I mean, years later, I'm down visiting my father, my mother, with my wife, Isabel, and my wife is always pushing, and she says, Alice, what was the best time in your life? And she says, oh, when I was a scientist, and my father says, stop talking about that, like, because, her best time should have been with him, right?
Sure.
But, she was just lit up with this love of science and making a difference in the world. And so during the war, she went out to the West Coast and worked at Cutter Labs and helped her younger sister, who had a husband was in the war, all everybody was in the war, and helping her raise her kids. And then comes back to the East after the war, and all the men are coming home from the war, right? But they're mostly young men coming home from the war. My mom's already at that point in her 30s. And so she's saying to herself, I guess I missed my chance. Like she's going to be not married. Well, my dad at the time had come to America in the 30s. He was a British subject, and he went on a mission to Labrador and met an American woman, came to America, and settled here and had 2 children, but the birth of his second child led to the death of his wife. So he goes off to the war. His story is hopefully amazing. He comes back, and he's got 2 children now, who are, when my mom comes along, they're 7 and 10 or 11. And my dad woos her, and my mom is an instant mom. She marries this man and has 2 children. Boom. But that's, she does it. And a couple of years later, I come along, and a year after me, my brother comes along. So it was a really interesting family because my younger brother and I were sort of one generation, and my older brother and sister were another generation. And I already got started with this whole thing of like people are the same, but people are different right there. Looking at my own family.
Well, yeah, plus they grew up, they were overseas. They had, there's so many differences.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. And plus, I grew up in this very different household. I mean, it was very British. I mean, my father, I went to church every Sunday. I was in the choir. I go in for 2 services. We'd come home, and at 1 o'clock every Sunday, we'd have roast beef, lamb, or ham for dinner. And I had chores every weekend, helping my dad in the garden, working side by side with him. And since my sister was gone and my older brother were gone, most of the time they went to boarding schools and they were off to college. And so I was always the oldest kid, except on holidays when I became the third in line.
Middle child. Oh, no.
It was weird. It was so weird. No, but I'm my mom's first, so of course there's a special relationship with her, obviously. I mean, though she has a special relationship with all of us. She really tried hard to be a really good mom to these two children who had lost their mother, especially my older brother Roy, who had no mother, right, at all. And she did her best, but it's always hard. Anyway, so we're growing up in this rather strange family, and I've yet to meet a normal family, but still, your own strangeness is your own. and we're all helping out. So my brother and I got used to, you take care of things. So we would set the table, we clear the table, we do dishes. I never saw sexual differentiation in terms of what you were supposed to do because everybody's helping in the family.
Good.
That was the
That's
thing.
Great.
And my mom would, in the morning I'd come down for breakfast and she'd have squeezed fresh orange juice right there waiting for you, and she'd have your breakfast and you'd go off to school, and you're a little kid, you don't know what your mom's doing, but later you're waking up and realizing she has a life,
What time was she getting up? Squeeze that orange juice.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like my dad would come home every evening. He'd go to New York to work and come home on the train. He'd have his dinner, and then he would sit with my brother and I every night in several years running and read to us every night.
Oh,
read with us every night.
Lucky
So
guy.
and my mom did it too, and they just instilled this love of reading and and just encouraging us to, do this. I realized, oh my God, they created such an environment of order and structure and responsibility, but, fostering curiosity and stimulating your mind and your heart. It was beautiful. I mean, it really was. I mean, and I realized how fortunate that I was to have all that when I compare it to other people's, even in my immediate neighborhood, who were having much more difficult times with various circumstances.
As a child, do you think you were aware of how fortunate you were, or as you got older?
No, I was in a magical period. I was here but not here. I was like spacey. I was astrologically, I was progressing to the sign of Pisces as I was born at the end of Aquarius. I was like in a dream world, and I didn't realize how magical and special it was until much later when I became more self-aware. But in the beginning, no, it was just this. This is your norm. I didn't realize how great a norm it was at the time. So I began to get hints of that as I exposed to kids in elementary school, then in middle and high school. You begin seeing all the different kinds of families there are. So that was certainly a potent influence when I began to think, wow, look what I've had here.
Did your mom work when you were grade school, elementary?
No, she stopped work, and that's why, looking back at the fondest time of her life was when she was a scientist. But she stayed very active. She was very active in the community. I remember her, being very involved in the church and doing activities at church. And once Planned Parenthood came along in the 60s, my mom was working all the time at Planned Parenthood. She worked at the thrift shop helping, she was always volunteering good. And as I grew older, I had all these people in the neighborhood come to me, people I knew my mom's friends, and some of their children were my friends. And I can't tell you how many times people came to me, took me aside and they said, your mother is so special. And I go, okay. She says, we came into this community 5 years ago, and she made it her business to introduce us to everybody and help us become part of this community and help us become part of this and part of that. She went out of her way to help other people belong. And I realized, oh my God! I mean, she just wasn't wrapped up in her own life and doing things and being out. She was taking an interest in everyone, and she was a great storyteller and just very warm and very loving. And my mom and dad, this loving relationship is like unbelievable. They just adored each other, and yet. But they're really not just emotional people; they're really intelligent people, and you couldn't get away with anything, and you being your observant little boy growing up with a very, very not a formal household, a loving but formal household. I learned you don't speak unless you're spoken to. You're a child, and then you eventually get privileges, to the point where I was a teenager, and I'd be having these arguments at the table, and I'd storm out of the room, go upstairs, because I'm get out of here, and my brother would look at my dad. My dad's laughing because he's like, because I'm pushing for some principle or some greater right to stay up a half hour later, an hour later, and they're not letting me. And then, of course, a little while they let us. But they always give the same thing to my brother, and I was so upset all the time because he's younger, and I'm the one crashing through the walls and breaking down the fences.
You had to break down those barriers.
Walks right through. He just walks right through,
Yeah, well,
and it's like,
the oldest versus the youngest. There's Nina, as you know, my sister's the oldest, and she went through a lot of that. I'm the youngest, so by the time it was my turn, it was like, okay, see you later.
No problem. No, it is amazing how birth order frames our experience, and then the dynamics of the family and all that. And of course, I think it's true of many families that when a couple marries, often that man or husband, will become more involved in the woman's family, and that may become the family they're more with all the time. But that's not always true. But it was very true for my family, because all my dad's family was back in England or in South Africa or in Middle East. They weren't here. So we only were with my mom's family forever,
Did you travel overseas when you were young?
They took us once overseas to do the tour of Europe, okay, when we were like 13 years old. I was 13 years old. And it was so memorable because I got to meet my great aunt, Olive, and J.C. who told me stories of the war and dealing with the Blitz and bombing in England. And my Aunt J.C. was a famous scientist. She was corresponding with scientists around the world, studying plankton, and she was an authority. And I just got this thing at my family, like, my dad's side and my mom's side.
This is pretty cool.
A lot of scientists and thinkers and people, and also very much involved in the tradition of defense and military, being soldiers and such, and all that stuff. It was just a sense of duty and honor and integrity that was just instilled in you.
I was curious how your mom juggled you and your brother and the older two kids, right? Because biologically you were her children. Was there a divide or a difference?
Well, I guess my sister being a little older was more difficult because she deliberately tried to sabotage some things my mom was doing and try to get her brother to not do certain things. That carried on for a while and caused some friction, but it went away quickly because she went to boarding school, so did my brother. Then they're off in college, and before, when I'm not even 10 years old, my sister's married and gone off to live in California, and my older brother is in college, then he goes and joins the military, and he's gone in the military, and they weren't there. I'm telling you, they were visitors on holidays. That's what I remember.
Did your brother sign up for, was he English or American? Who did he fight for?
No, they're all American, born in America. He joined the American military, and they promised him when he went to officers candidate school, we're not going to send you to Vietnam. And the second he graduated, they shipped him off to Vietnam, and he was there for 13 months, and that was quite an experience too. But my mom juggled it all. She was pretty amazing. She was a baker. She was a scientist, so of course baking was great because it's very clear measurements about everything, and timing is everything. And she was great with that. And she was also a good cook. So was my dad. He would always make some of the big dinners. So again, it wasn't divided up, but she handled a lot of it because he was away at the office. Monday through Friday. But I always remember coming home, and she would have special things for us and special treats and this and that, and very involved in our school and whatever we're doing in school and supporting that. Yeah, she was capable of doing it all and staying involved both in the community and in social service in some way, but really took care of the family. But we all had a role to play in terms of how capable we were of doing certain things.
So what was one of your roles?
Well, mine was certainly gardening with my dad, and I had to drag my brother out of the bed every Saturday and Sunday because he wanted to sleep in. And now he's the gardener. He gardens all the time. His house is full of gardens, and he all the stuff he does. That's all his spare time is spent gardening. So it's kind of funny, here I am in New York. I don't have a garden. I have a couple plants, but that's about it. But But anyways, it's amazing how these things get instilled in you from not what you're told to do, but what you're watching and observing and experiencing and feeling.
Was she better? Was she better at showing by example, maybe, as opposed to specifics? Because when you tell kids, you put parameters on things, they don't want to do stuff. But by watching her, she made things look fun and interesting.
Oh, sure. No, look, I remember regularly when my brother was in the war in Vietnam for 13 months. We would spend a day or two a month making things for him to send to him. We send him care packages every month. We would make fudge for him and cakes for him, and she said, "Oh, let's make stuff for Roy." And we said, "Oh, good," and we all joined in, and so it was all like not a task. It was like, "Oh, this is what we do, and you're going to want to do this," and we did want to do this. So,
ooh, she was good.
Yeah, it felt good. I mean, obviously, when I got at certain points in my time and in the weekends, and I want to go, my friends are playing, and I can't play till I get my chores done. I want to get away, but I knew what I had to do. So you did your chores, but day after day, she included us in things and showed us things and how to do stuff. So I got to the point where, I'm making the Caesar salad. I'm making I'm like a sous chef, we're all taking turns making parts of the dinner. And that was, just a sense of what you did. And it was just wonderful. Then as I became older and I'm getting ready to go to college, I didn't realize what she was doing at the time, but looking back, oh, God, that's what she's trying to do. She sent me into the city for the day to go to the place, to Cornell School of Medicine here in New York, to have a day there. And they took me to various departments, and I watched, I was sitting in a lecture for people who have sickle cell anemia. Then I went and watched a man who just had a stroke and how they were testing him for his loss of faculty and were dealing with what parts of his memory affected. And went to another thing. I was just moving around in this thing. I realize now my mom was hoping I'd go down the path of medicine, right? Which would be a natural for her. I want a doctor in the family or whatever she was looking for. Well, unbeknownst to her, they unfortunately made a choice to bring me to another laboratory where they were doing an experiment, and the featured thing in this experiment was a cat. I'll say no more. But when I saw what they did to that cat, I come back to my mom, and I'm like, I'm so upset. And she's so upset that I'm so traumatized by what I witnessed that she realized, I may have not brought about the direction in his life that I'm looking for
so
here.
Much
I
for
went
Dr.
to the
Bill Attride.
Yeah, I wasn't going to, first do no harm, and I'm not causing harm to poor defenseless animals. So not that that's what I'd have to do in medicine, but, you're young and you don't know, and I didn't go down that path. Which, I don't regret at all.
You did did you study economics in grad school?
Well, in undergrad, I first studied anthropology, and then I finished that, all the requirements for that, so I tacked on a second degree of political science, political theory, when studying especially feminism, because I had this great feminist teacher in school, and she was just amazing. And it was such an education to see the world through a different lens and go, oh, my God. And it was just eye-opening. And then I went to graduate school here in New York, and I got a degree in economics, but really philosophy. I was really a Hegelian philosopher, and then spun off of that to study Jung on my own, and then astrology, and I'm off and running with. I was studying everything, and I didn't know why.
Well, but you were fed that as a child. All of that inspiration and that knowledge was just so fulfilling to you, right?
Oh, my God, no. I just wanted to know everything. And they got the encyclopedia, A to Z, and I would read it from A to Z and go back and start over again, constantly.
Wow.
Because I just had this desire to know, and I just did that, because the more I was absorbing, the better I felt. And I was, very studious. I was one of those pain-in-the-ass kids in the classroom. The teacher asked a question, my hand would always shoot up, and they're all the, your classmates aren't so happy with that. But I was so eager. I was so excited. That's usually where I ran into trouble, is my eagerness. I'm jumping into things with enthusiasm, which I learned to pull back eventually, but it's still in my nature to be enthusiastic. I'm full of that.
Joie de vivre. You have a love of life, Love of education. Did you ever, was your enthusiasm, did you get in trouble in school from the kids? Did you ever get bullied and stuff, picked at? And
We were playing one day. I'll never forget this. And my teacher, his name was Mrs. Will in the second grade. And we're all playing in the school line, lunch line, and stamping on one of those feet, just like playfully. And I stamp on a foot. But it's not a child's foot. It's one of the custodian's feet. And so I'm sent back to the classroom. And you go wait, don't you know? And so I'm waiting in the classroom. Well, finally, one of the students comes running and says, "Hey, they're closing the cafeteria. You better run down there and get your lunch." So I run down there, get my lunch, come back to the classroom. Everybody's in the classroom. The teacher says, "Don't you sit down. Come up here." I came up to the front of the class, and the teacher says, "I told you to stay here." I say, "But," and she wouldn't let me finish. Like, that I thought I'd been asked to come to get my food, but she didn't have it. She wasn't going to have any of that. She just see me disobeying. And she made me stand in the corner the rest of the day, and looking away from her, not just standing there looking at the wall.
Ugh.
I wasn't back in school for 3 months after that.
Why?
My weight crushed me, and every morning I'd wake up with a painful stomach ache, and miraculously at 3:00 every day the stomach ache would go away. And I went to see doctors. I had no idea what was going on and all this stuff. And I had to take Paregoric or whatever to calm the stomach. And all these, I was like a nervous wreck because of that one incident.
How did your mom and dad handle it?
They were there in the background handling it because I'm seeing people and talking to people. And I know what's going on. Everybody knows what happened. But the child has to overcome that trauma, and it's going to be a journey. So they can't wish it away. They can't take it away. So, that becomes part of my formative understanding, right? About how people use power and authority and they misuse it.
No wonder you remember your teacher's name so well. Oh, my gosh.
No, it was great. I mean, everything forms you, and eventually it's for your benefit to become more sensitive or stronger, whichever the case may be, given the incident or the circumstance. But it's all good in the end, hopefully. But my mom protected us, but she didn't keep us from any harm. I mean, we took her breath away a number of times. I mean, I remember my brother and I playing outside, and we've got this wire basket, and we're taking turns rolling down the hill in this open wire like trash basket that's big enough for a child to be in. We're rolling down the hill. What we forgot is 6 months earlier, my brother and I had broken some those old milk bottles at the bottom of the hill against some rocks. So we rolled down a couple times, and I rolled down one time, and I rolled right over all this glass. And I get up, and my leg is just covered in blood. And so I go running up the hill, and the door up, my mom was in, and she looks at me and goes, "Oh, my God," and she grabs a towel, wraps my leg, throws me in a car, and rushes me off to the doctor. Okay, well, that was in it. That's, the parent is watching their child bleeding out right in front of them, right? So yeah, she didn't hesitate. She was like right there, very clear. And
in times of tragedy or an accident, or she could think, she had her thinking hat on all the time.
Yeah, she was very clear. She was very perceptive. She was a Scorpio, so I didn't know that at the time, of course. But she just saw right through things. And she was the kind of person who would observe, but she didn't make a thing of it. She wasn't going to lord it over you or let you know she knew what you really did or whatever, but you knew she knew. And so she was quiet in that way. It was a firm, quiet, reassuring love that, you felt, I felt with both my parents. I could trust them and talk to them about anything, there are things as a teenager you were trying to cover up and hide, but, they knew. But
smoking
still,
pot?
they were
Were
really...
you smoking pot, and did they catch you smoking pot?
My dad, he didn't discourage it. He found us growing our own pot. It's like, oh my good, my boys are now they're following my footsteps to being a gardener. My mom was appalled. She was so afraid.
Did your dad smoke pot? Do you know?
Oh, no,
Oh, he never did.
but
He
he,
just wasn't
no,
excited for you.
to my knowledge, I mean, I don't believe so.
Oh,
And
that's
and
good.
my mom, this is the thing that sort of was dividing him at the time. Like she was saying, this is wrong, it's illegal, and my dad was saying, no, they're growing things, because he was all into growing things. Like he called all his plants his babies. I mean, he was a cancer, and so he did everything from seed, and he was so nurturing. And when he retired, he became basically a farmer. Because that's what he did in his retirement, just grow things. And so, they agreed on most things, but on that point they disagreed for sure. It wasn't terrible, but
Well, good for them. That was kind of opposites attract. At least I believe opposites attract. You with your all that you know and your astrological knowledge and psychology and philosophies. I don't know how you pull it all together.
I don't know either.
My guest is Bill Attride, who's based out of New York. Bill, I want to talk about you for a couple of minutes and what exactly you do. So, well, why don't you describe yourself for my listeners?
Oh boy, I'm a seer. That's what I realize my job is now. I think you get to a point in your life where you can boil down into your elevator pitch a line or two or a word that sums up your journey and maybe your purpose. Like Isabel, my wife, would say, if you ask her now, we're both in our 60s, who are you? She'd say, I'm a creator, which is what she's done her whole life. My whole adult life, I've been helping people understand themselves better and their world better. That's my job. So I'm a seer. And so my tool is just astrology, that I stumbled across this. It was like the linchpin. I'd studied everything and anything because I was so curious, from metaphysics to philosophy to science to history, other cultures. I had no idea that I would draw upon all of it, but I needed something to hold it all together. And the thing that held it all together was this science and art known as astrology, which I know is the first science. Since humans woke up and began wondering what the hell is going on down here, they began to notice patterns in the heavens that align with certain circumstances here on Earth and began to build up this knowledge of the correspondences of these energy forms and life down here. And so I realized this has been there since the beginning of time, and all the great thinkers we can think of in the Western tradition, from Plato and Aristotle on up to Isaac Newton, they were also astrologers, so they believed in it, and not in the fatalistic, deterministic way that many people think it works. It's not that. It's here to inform and inspire and guide us, but we're the ones who make the choices. We create the content of what we're encountering, but the timing and framing of those experiences is set in motion by time itself, which we're all involved in this giant sort of clock that the planets and the stars sort of describe in the heavens for us. So for me, it's very comforting because it says there's an order to the universe. There are correspondences and connections that we can trace, and we can explain things. And not just what happened, but the meaning behind what's happening. To me, is so comforting and reassuring. And it's part of the ancient traditions and ancient teachings. And again, found throughout all cultures, throughout all time. And I'm just very grateful to be here practicing it in this new way we're practicing it, because like any science, it can be practiced depending upon the intention of that people or culture for different reasons. I see it as a tool for self-understanding and greater self-determination. And that's how I do it. How I do what I do with my clients.
You help people all the time. You're helping people.
That's my job.
That's your job.
Yeah. Every day, several times a day, I'll be with a client for an hour, hour and a half at least. Just either here in my office, often for years, but now certainly this whole year it's all been virtual, and most of my work has been with clients around the world on Skype or what have you, on a phone call. So I've never met them and never will meet them, but it doesn't matter. But after every session, it's typical. My wife's in the room and she's writing her next novel. That's her next iteration of being a creator. And I'll walk in the room and she'll turn around from her desk and she says, I know what you're going to say. And I go, I love my job is what I say. Because I can't believe this is what I do. It's like, it's joyful. it's so meaningful. And I get such wonderful feedback from my clients that they just have never had an experience like this, or that something deeply touched them and moved them and clarified something or released something for them, whatever it may be. And it varies, but it's I can't believe this is what I do.
You get to cover all the bases, all the sciences, all the arts, the historical aspects, like you just mentioned. I'm glad I didn't put one or two words on it, because the way you describe it, and I think it's really coming from your heart, that you know yourself and what fulfills you. So if people are interested in doing a session with you, because you do private sessions, what's the best way to contact you should my listeners be interested?
Oh, sure. The easiest is just my name, Bill Attride. It's BILLATTRIDE @gmail.com. And I'm always on email. It's the major way for communicating. Or people can call me. They can, if they Google my name, because I have two blogs running, but they just mirror each other. And I have the Blog Talk Radio site, and I have a Medium site, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and all the stuff.
You are, which is really great. You're very easy to find.
Yeah, so it's easy. If you Google my name, it'll pop up everywhere, which, that's what happens in the modern day. So I've never promoted myself. For years, it drove Isabel crazy because, I do my work, and it's all by word of mouth, and the practice is building, and I never... this whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. It's spiritual. I'm never going to advertise. And she was seeking from the world of publicity to advertising, so it's driving her crazy. But I'm saying, no, you can't do this.
You have the radio show on Sunday afternoons as well that people can tune into, calling. So you've got all. She has to trust you that it will all happen, right?
But it would have happened. But it would have happened sooner if I started writing. So, like when I started the blog, it's like, it just exploded. She goes, see, I did the blog really for me to get my words out there, and I was trying to finish a book that I still have to finish because I could never finish this book because I kept on rewriting and editing, and So I said, let me just write essays. So I began writing the blog, and it just flowed, and I loved it. But also I reached a wider audience without much trouble after that, and that was, I wasn't looking for that. It just happened, and it was nice. And the same thing with the radio show and other things. So it's, I'm very fortunate. I'm very grateful. My mom, when I went down this path, which, was over 40 years ago now, and she would always take me and say, Bill, tell me what you do again. Because she was a hard scientist. She was a classical scientist, right? And here I am in this pseudoscience, this thing that, for all she knew, is like, this is something that's not science at all. And I would try to patiently explain to her what I do and how I do it, and she would smile, and I think she realized I'm just helping people. So I think there was a part of her that wished I'd taken that medical route, right? That I'd done what would have been what she would have done, or what she would more understand as being real medical or scientific work. And that's okay. I wasn't going to try to convince her otherwise or make a big case as to why this is the first science. And it wasn't my job to do that. And I didn't want to disturb her in her own beliefs about, but it was something there, but I think she liked the fact that I was different. Because I know that's something that she was too. She was different. And she, in her life, she married later than most people. I was her firstborn, and she was almost 40 years old. And back then, in the 1950s, that's not common. And she married a man who, though he's English, totally foreign. She wasn't doing the normal thing herself. She was a scientist. That was still ahead of her time in her time. So I think she, in her openness and wonder about people and being so friendly and engaging with people and helping people, we're very much alike. And just in our own time found our own way to be that, right? But my mom was magical. My dad's magical, too. My mom was definitely magical.
So lucky. I love hearing my guests say that. My guest has been Bill Attride, and I will put all of your information in my Simplecast site so people can find it. Bill Attride, sharing stories with us this week about his mother, Alice. Thank you for joining me, Bill.
Thank you so much.
I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother.